Welcome to the Three Old Goalies podcast, a Delusion Group podcast.
The Three Old Goalies are brought to you by thesquad.com because everybody loves a W. Check out the squad for all your recruiting needs. Music for the show is provided by the Floodgate Operators. Be sure to check them out on Apple Music or Spotify.
The Three Old Goalies podcast is not for goalkeepers under the age of 17. And now we send you over to Boa, Evie, and Bone, the Three Old Goalies.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Three Old Goalies. We're actually two old goalies tonight. We're playing hurt. John Boa is on injured reserve, flying back from a Belmont Abbey Soccer Hall of Fame function in Atlanta, and but that should not detract from the quality that we have to share with you tonight. We have a very special guest who has been around soccer for decades, is a true soccer guy, and we've been trying to get him at least for a month, and we've had to keep postponing. But finally, we're all together, and he wasn't a goalkeeper, but he was a defender, so goalkeeper's best friend, and I'm hopefully, if Ryan can find that photo of Joe about to, if you're a Star Trek fan, about to transport number 6 from Connecticut into the 4th row, is a great photo, I think. So anyway, if you can pull that up and put it on the screen there for us, Ryan, at some point. But Joe has a great history, not only as a player, but involved with Nike and involved in the business side of the sport for decades in the United States. So we thank you, Joe Elsmore, for taking time and joining us. And where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm in Portland, Oregon, out on the deck. It's still light out,
Yeah.
Only 5 o'clock. So I put some trees in the background there. It's just, Oregon's all about the trees and everything. So, yeah, I've been out here for 30 years now. So, right, New Jersey to North Carolina, a little bit of Chicago, and then I've been out here. Nike's world headquarters are out here in Beaverton, Oregon. So I've been living out here for 30 years. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Living in Portland, but going all over the world during those 30 years.
Correct. Millions of flight miles and hotel miles. I looked at my. I was in Miami last week, and I looked at my nights out of town just in Marriott, and it's been over 2.5 years just in the Marriott. I spent 2.5 years in. So
wow.
It's one of those. Talk to the wife. How are you guys still together? Well, I've been gone a lot. So. But I've spent a lot of time on the road and had a lot of good times, but also not as sexy as it sounds being gone all the time. It's travel's not easy either, but I've been to a lot of places. So
yeah. Well, travel it's gotten progressively worse over the last few years, but it's never. That's a good way to put it. It's not as sexy as everybody thinks it is. It's it's why they call it work, but you do. The other side of that coin is, and I'm sure you'll share with us tonight, you've been privy to some huge milestones in U.S. soccer, to be honest with you. And you've been right there, in the mix with it going on. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Greg Deutsch. A little word of warning here, Joe. I call Greg the Mike Wallace of soccer interviews. So, he's been doing his digging. So, you may have to have a few no comment answers, so.
Yeah, I've listened to a few of the podcasts. So
Okay.
I'm kind of ready, so we'll see. Thomas Rongen dropped Johan Cruyff's name right away to take the pressure off him, and Hank's got better stories than everybody. So I'll figure out how to mold in with.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
Again, Joe,
go ahead, man. Take it away.
Yeah. Again, Joe, thanks for being on the show, and in true observing who we get on, Evie. Right? Of course, we have the Nike hat.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned, he played at North Carolina State.
So you're wearing
red, white, and Wolf Pack Black. How about that, Joe?
Yeah,
Wolf Pack Black.
Nice.
And they just signed a 6-year deal with Adidas, which we'll get into with Joe. Obviously, he's been with Nike for a while, but. Evie, you alluded to Soccer Town USA.
which is a great movie if you haven't seen it. Joe was in it. I think I saw 2 or 3 photos of him. I don't know, Evie, if you got to see it. Very, very entertaining. Really hits on not just one, but 2, 3 players, Tab Ramos, Tony Miola, and John Harkes. And, Evie, I mean, to have one person come from your city, right, and represent the national team. 2, you're like, whoa, but 3, crazy, right?
Yeah.
And just a lot of interesting facts about the school. And, that's where obviously Joe, came from and ended up at North Carolina State. And interesting here, EV, he was the first year with Larry Gross taking over the program.
Yeah.
So, Joe, share with us, why did you, what were your choices back then? Why did you choose, that school, especially? Did you know Coach Gross was coming on, or was it a surprise at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I can almost take up the whole show talking about Kearney, right? So I don't want to. I really don't want to skip over that, because even today, I still use Kearney as my my authenticity. As soon as you bring up you're from there, everybody's heard of it. Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows the Tab, Hark's, Tony's story, Tony Miola's story, and if you look in even all the books like back in the day, so. 100 years soccer in America. If you like, the first story in there is about Kearney. I mean, soccer came to the United States in one of the first pro leagues and teams started there. So I've always been a soccer kid. I've kicked the ball off the wall 1 billion times when I growing up, right? Outside, juggled, before dinner, always had the ball at my feet, and that's just how the town was. And we kind of lived and breathed the sport. And, the Cosmos came up around back then. We used to be able to walk over to the stadium, a few miles away. So all those Kearney stories, we can go on and on forever. So I played there, grew up, played at the Scots Club, like if you did watch I don't want to go over the whole, the whole movie, but the Scots Club was a place where we gathered basically in a bar, in a basement of a bar, where all the kids were changing and getting together and playing games. And we had like one van that we got in, like 14 kids to travel to away games and stuff. So really hardcore, tough place, but loved soccer for sure. So everyone was a player there. Most of the players in high school, we only lost 4 or 5 games over the years, and and a lot of kids got scholarships to college, right? And that was our inner city way out by being a soccer player, right? And, so I wasn't the best player on the team when I was a senior. I mean, we had guys like Jerry McEwen, who went to Mercer County and he was National Player of the Year there, and then wound up coming down to NC State as well. There's a lot of good players. John Arnott was full scholarship at Akron, and I was recruited. I don't want to say heavily, but, all the New Jersey schools, Rutgers and everything. And by the way, Hartwick was my dream back then. You guys know the old Hartwick stories. And a lot of Kearney kids went up to Hartwick and played up there. So I was always, I wanted to play at Hartwick. But I just wasn't good enough to I wanted to play my freshman year. I didn't want to sit on a bench. So I had an offer from Air Force Academy, a couple other ones. But Larry Gross, like you guys said, was his first year. And he was searching. He had money. NC State's first year really for scholarships, and he had money. And he came up to New Jersey, and he came to my house, and I met him, and I took a recruiting trip down there. And I went to like a basketball game. I think I went to NC State Carolina basketball game, to be honest with you, like in the front row on my recruiting trip, and then like to a sorority party after that. And it was the coolest place in the world. I had never been, down south at all. I remember opening the window of the car, asking somebody, "Hey, where's the Case Athletic Center?" And he's like, "Y'all gotta go down the street." I was like, "Holy shit!" And they really talked like that. And I rolled up the window because the only thing I saw was like Barney Fife, and I thought they were fake. I thought people fake talk like that. I didn't know they really talk like that. So anyway, I had a great time at it. I went to training. I had my Celtic strip on at training, and everybody had like reversible T-shirts on and stuff like that. I'm like, I could definitely start here my freshman year for sure. So I picked it. I went down there and I had a great career at NC State. But that's kind of how I got down there. Really, the recruiting trip in the beginning, and money and just it was fun. So
Yeah. Your high school, you mentioned 4 or 5 losses. EV, here's his career: 60 wins, 6 losses, and 4 ties. Not too shabby at the high school level. He played at NC State, from 1978 to 81, all ACC 3 years, team captain the last year. He was a member of the first NCAA tournament team that qualified. Went 17-3-1 in 1981. Still the most wins in school history to this day. How about that? 12 shutouts in 21 games. I found this interesting. 560 shots in that season.
Oh, wow.
That's like 26 a game. I mean, it's crazy.
I can't believe you.
78 goals for the team, which is the second highest single season record. They went on an 11-game unbeaten streak. Tell us a little bit about that season. What you remember? I mean, again, I saw you shaking your head when I said 560 shots. Obviously, you had some firepower.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. You dug up those stats. I have some stats, but I didn't have those. So good job, Greg, man. Nice research work there. Now I know why you run the show here, right? I love that.
Exactly.
But that was, 17-3-1. We're all really good for all 4 years, but senior year we were very, very good. But you had Clemson down there, right? And they had like, talking about goalkeepers. They had like 10 Nigerians and a goalkeeper from New Jersey, Finney Frock. I don't know if you guys remember.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
I believe he's a Jersey kid. But they had 10 Nigerians. We had 5. And we could beat everybody. We had a really weird loss to Wake Forest game that I maybe only get my miss in college because I had an ankle injury. But Clemson, we made the NCAA tournament. Clemson beat us 3-1 down there. Donald Igwe Bike scored 2, I believe. Remember, he became the NFL kicker.
Oh yeah,
and everything, right? They were really, really good. I mean, for all 4 years, they're a great team, Clemson, and we never beat them. I think we lost 4-3 that year at home, and then we lost 3-1 in NCAA tournament. So 2 of our losses were against Clemson that year. But we were really good, really attacking team. I mean, I wound up with 13 goals and 13 assists as a defender, over my career, right? So, and I remember, always storming forward on the right, and not have to worry about defending too much because we always had the ball and we're always attacking, and we're very, very dangerous. The thing that we kind of lacked that year was we had a lot of shots, but we scored a lot of goals. But I think we could have scored so more. The Nigerian forwards we had were really good, but they were powerful and skilled, which would try to hit the ball through the net instead of just putting it in the net. Yeah. So I remember, Chris Ogu, just keep it down a little bit, take 10 miles off the pace and hit it on goal, and stuff like that. So but great players and a great team back then. So
yeah. And after you graduate, you stay in the area to be NC State women's assistant coach, and you got into refereeing. Why did you want to get into coaching at that level? Stick around there. Yeah,
everyone or a lot of people we know, right, in our industry and in our career, and soccer people have got into coaching. And I, for some reason, I didn't really like training. I liked the games and the tactics and the man management and the, game day and all that stuff. But setting up the cones to do the 3v1, 5v2, it just wasn't something that really excited me that much, right? So I coached for a little bit. I coached like West Cary Junior High. I ran a club for a little bit. Helped the women at NC State for a couple of years there. So I enjoyed it, but I mostly enjoyed game day, or night before, or the people part of it, not the training part of it. So I never really went that way. And then the refereeing thing came because I don't know. I just I can't remember how I started, but I did a game once, and the parents loved me because I actually played the game. You know how the refs were. I'm a big anti-ref guy, and coming as a big-time player, coming to North Carolina, the refereeing level back then was so low, right? I mean, Ken Chartier, you guys know him, right? He was
Yes.
like the best ref. He would come down from Baltimore, like, thank God we actually have a guy who,
Yeah.
but the refereeing level was so tough back then, and so I always kind of had a feeling, how did these guys do this? So anyway, I did a game. I think it was a high school game or a youth game, and the parents liked me, and the other refs liked me. So I really quickly, you guys, and I'll keep the refereeing stuff short, but I rose through the levels really, really fast in reffing, and I don't know if you have a question ready for me on Greg.
I do. Great segue.
So, I don't know. I liked it because I was outside and I got exercise in the sun, and I stayed close to the game. Those were the main reasons. I couldn't play. I had a knee injury. I couldn't really play. We did a little bit of the amateur stuff after college, but eventually I couldn't play anymore. So,
I mean, he ends up doing the center of the 1992 Duke UNC championship game.
Oh yeah, no, I remember Joe as when he was refereeing. He was an excellent referee, and like Joe says, because he played, he knew the game, right? And we don't, Suffice to say that you just if you and we all know as a player, if you get on the field and a guy is a good referee, yeah, okay, you're going to have calls against you, but it doesn't bother you. When they're terrible referees, it pisses you off,
Yeah.
And as a coach too, you're like, we work all week, we work hard, and then we come out here and these three clowns screw everything up.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. But Joe is an excellent referee.
Yeah. I mean, look, one offside wrong call is like could be the whole entire game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like that's how big time it is that you got to be right on stuff, right? And I one of the things I did was I really concentrated on the players to make sure I got the fouls right. I didn't really give a shit about like the TV cameras too close to the end line or someone cursing, and giving me a yellow card for saying shit, I mean, I didn't worry about even the coaches yelling and coming out of the box and all that. I didn't really worry about it. It was just, to me, that was part of the game. But if you got the fouls right, the players respected you and you made them play the ball, everything else was fine.
Yeah.
Like totally fine. Yeah. And I loved all that chaos around it all, I remember one game I was running, I was in the center and then running down the sidelines. Their parents were saying, "Look, he's pushing him." I'm like, you watch too much basketball. Like I would have all like the banter with everybody and kind of have fun with it, right?
Yeah,
right.
So and really, what happened, Greg, and you're right, the coaches like me, right? So the guys like Berticelli wanted me to come to Greensboro, and Rennie wanted me to come to Duke, and Warming and Colenstein, like all those guys wanted me to do all their games, right? And then those guys actually moved on, like Berticelli with the Notre Dame. And when I was in Chicago for a little while, I did all the Notre Dame, Indiana games. So I was doing games all over the country because the coaches liked me. So I got to do the NCAA Women's National Championship game. And you might have the Mia Hamm story there too, Greg. If you want to talk about that, I can. But I loved the reffing. Eventually, I couldn't ref anymore because Nike was getting into business big time. And the last game I did was University of Portland against St. Louis quarterfinals. So I was trying to do a Nike deal with Joey Clark, trying to do a Nike deal with Clive, right? And it went to like one of those 8 overtime ones, 0-0 penalties. And at Portland Stadium, like they have fans at one end and the street on the other end. Like, and I said, Clive, what side do you want to get penalties on? And he said, I want to go away from my fans. I'm like, but the fans are here. We should do them down there. And he said, no, go down there. So I went down the other end, and Portland lost on penalties. And Clyde was pissed at me for a couple weeks. And he like told me to go there, and I'm like, I want to do it in front of your fans. So it was it got to be really tense, me trying to do deals with them and ref and have relationships. So.
Right. Yeah. Before we do the Mia story, in case people don't know, Joey was a former Nike director, as he mentioned, for 30 years in their marketing. He was the director of North America sports marketing. He was also the soccer sports marketing manager for, I think, like 5 to 7 years. So share with us how you got hired by Nike.
Yeah, so after college, I was a Parks and Recreation major, right? So Recreation Resource Administration, it was called, at North Carolina State. So I got a job with the Raleigh Parks and Rec Department, and I ran like the Little League baseball, Little League, football, little league, all basketball. I ran the rec center, JC Park, it was called, right? And I think I was making, like $17,000 or $15,000, and like there was no real career in that, in terms of like I didn't see it, and I didn't really want to be an administrator. I like sports so much. So a soccer store, Larry Gross, my original soccer coach at NC State, him and a friend opened up a soccer store in North Carolina. And Evie, we can go way back on this one, right? But it was we bought a franchise from Nick Papadakis.
Oh yeah,
in Atlanta, right? And Soccer Kick was the name of the store. Yeah. And we opened a store, out on Highway 1, out by where WRL fields are now. And we opened a store, and they wanted me to be the store manager. So I left the Parks and Rec world and moved out to and managed the store. But I wasn't content in the store, because you're putting like shoes on little kids and you're stuck in the store the whole time, right? And then I saw the sales reps, the Umbro guy and the Adidas guy and the Puma guy all coming in. They're like driving around, selling stuff, making money, and I wanted to be one of them. So Curtis Leeper, who I don't know if you guys know.
That's my you boy.
Yeah. Curtis was the national sales manager for Nike Soccer out of Florida.
That's right.
So he was my rep for the North Carolina store, and he needed somebody in Chicago, and he liked me, right? So he goes, "Hey Joe, you want to lead a store and be a Nike rep in Chicago?" I'm like, "Yes." So like one day I like packed my shit, flew with him to Chicago, went around all his apartments, I was like, "Well, where do you want to live?" I'm like, "Well, Oak Branch, River, Stream, Park apartments." Like I didn't even know where the hell I was, right? So I settled in Glendale Heights, Chicago, and became a regional soccer rep for Nike, covering 10 states there, being in the sales department, okay? And that was in 1988, right? So I don't know how far you want me to go, Greg, but then so I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then finally in 1993, Nike turned the switch on in soccer for around '94 World Cup, and I moved from Chicago to Beaverton, to become one of like 5 people that started Nike Soccer Division, and was in on all the strategic planning for that. And, and my niche happened to be sports marketing, because I knew the players, knew the coaches, knew the federation, I knew everybody. So I was like, I knew everybody. So I moved in. I wasn't really a product guy. I wasn't really into sales. I moved more into the sports marketing zone, and from '94 World Cup on till last year, I just rose inside of Nike Soccer Sports Marketing.
Yeah, this is a good segue. So Evie, I don't know if you know, he was the person that found Mia Hamm and signed her. He was doing obviously some refereeing.
Wow. Okay. I mean, yes, Joe signed her, but Stevie Wonder could see that Mia Hamm was a good player. And if you coached against her, which I did, it was like, whatever we do, try not to get the ball on her side of the field. Yeah, because we'll lose it and we'll lose the game. That kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Well, that was that story is crazy, right? It's actually written in a bunch of books, Greg. Too.
Right. Yeah. Share it with us, please. Yeah. Yes.
But the reality was, when I was in Chicago, I was still reffing, right? And I was moonlighting on Nike's business as a sales rep. And that's when so 92, I was already in Chicago, but I was reffing there, tons of college and a lot of those international matches too, the Croatians versus, some tough matches, right?
Yes.
So I got invited to do the Final Four, women's NCAA, right? And it was actually back in North Carolina, and I think I ran the line for the semis, but I reffed the final. I mean, the center referee for the final, 1992, and Mia was playing, and I knew her. Obviously, I knew her. I'm not sure how much she knew me. I knew Anson really well because I went through 4 years playing against him and hanging out with him, right? And so. Like during the game, I'm like this Nike guy and I'm reffing and I know she's great. Right. And we built this little relationship on the field and she's, and she was getting fouled all the time, tugging on her, pulling her, trying to stop her. And I want to let the game go. Right. Cause I'm one of those refs, and she was getting dragged down. She would just look at me like, she's like, like Joe. And I'm like, Mia, And we did that like so many times because like you're faster, strong. I'm not giving you every call. And she's like, they're pulling. I'm like, I know. So we built like this really weird rapport, and you had to be close to her because she had the ball a lot and they played it to her a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I built this rapport in her, and then after the game, I don't know if we hugged or whatever. It's a great game. They won, obviously, and I'm like, Mia, don't do anything in life until you talk to me. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I need to talk to you about something. I work for Nike. She's like, oh, okay, and Mia's, off to the next game. We're off to the next practice, right? And so I went to Anson and said, Anson, don't do anything. I need to talk to you about Mia. I work for Nike. So I flew to Oregon and I actually talked to a guy named Steve Miller, who was my boss. And I said, look, we're not really in soccer yet, we're because Umbro, Adidas, or 99, Nike had like 1% market share, Yeah. I'm like, we're definitely not women's soccer, but there's just something about this girl that we need to connect with, right? And so I had to explain everything to everybody, because no one at Nike knew what was going on in soccer, right? And so I said, okay, what do we need? So I don't know. So I flew back, had lunch with Mia in the Rathskeller in Chapel Hill. Took out a napkin. She didn't have tears in her eyes, but she was so into it. She's like, I just want to be able to play soccer. I don't want to have to get a job. I just want to play soccer full time. I'd love it. I don't want to have to get a job. And back then there was no pro. There was no nothing. So the players had to go to work. So we took a napkin out. We did, what's your rent? What's your car payment? What's your laundry? What's your, and we came up to that. It was like $8,000 something on a napkin. Flew back to Oregon, went to Steve Miller, a couple other people, and said, look, we just need to, she just wants to play. It's just, she doesn't want to have to work. So we gave her a deal for $20,000 a year, flew back, signed a deal, and I mean, that was in 93, right? And I mean, she eventually wound up with the biggest building on Nike campus, which was a humongous building. And what she went on to do as a human being and a footballer and a sports person is just, there's movies about that, right? So, but that's how it started with Nike and me and her. And to this day, we still kind of joke about it, me and Mia, like how we built our relationship and how we got together. And I mean, look, I leverage it. Leverage is not the right word, but I'm proud of how I did that. And I build my life on relationships. And that's a perfect example. One of the many, many examples I have around relationships that I love about sports and about soccer. To be honest.
Yeah, what a great story. For all the people listening, he's also been part of the signing with Abby Wambach, Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, many, many others. He mentioned the Mia Hamm building. What I'm going to get into is what part of the commercial with Michael Jordan, anything you can do, I can do better. Obviously, you're in marketing. That's what you like to do. Share us the making of that commercial.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk to Mia first of all, right? And how authentic and real she is as a person. My story was she's the best player in the world, right? And she's like, no, I don't want to be called that. I don't want, that's not right. That's not who I am. I'm the ultimate team player. I love my team. We work together. Everybody is has the the same level of responsibility and shares in the wins and the losses, right? So we, Nike wanted to put her on a pillar, and then like we can't put her on a pillar because she doesn't want that. That's not her, right? So there's a bunch of ads you can go back and research if you like plug in the dentist, right? The Mia Hamm, the dentist ad, where she came out and she had to get a filling, right? And the dentist like, Tiffany Milbrick came out and said, I need to get a filling, and then Mia's like was waiting in the waiting room. She was like, well, I will get a filling too, and then like Randy Chastain stands up and I will get a filling, and Brianna stands up and I will get a filling, Tisha Venturini says, I will get a filling. That they didn't even need fillings, but they all wanted to get one just because they're such a team player. So that there's a ton of marketing that went on around Mia, team. And I think the U.S. national team today still embodies that we are a team type thing, right? Coming from the 99ers per se. But so that was an important point about Mia. Also, she cared about kids, right, as well. So there's a lot of marketing around her. If you let me play, if you let letting girls play, and that was a big. Nowadays it's different. Girls have a lot more opportunities. Back then it wasn't the same. She was a big advocate for that as well. And then the Jordan one, look, I'm not in basketball. I don't tend to say I was part of the creative or anything on this one, but having her hook up with a selfless person like Michael, both being from North Carolina, you both had Gatorade deals. They were just perfect together in what they did, and they both like to play golf on the side, and so those two just were really easily put together to share communication to connect to consumers. So,
yeah. Evie, this is pretty amazing. When Joe started, and Nike really sort of got rolling, they went from 40 million to 3 billion in revenue, which is amazing. Which is a good segue. Mia also, in case you forgot, had the M9 line, which was the apparel line. It was shoes. Joe, what aspect were you involved in maybe giving some feedback to her? Or did she just say, hey, I don't want your feedback, I'm going to just plunge into this?
Yeah, at this point, Nike's a big company, right? They have product experts. They're investing in the world in product, and so I'm not taking any credit for product at all. At all. I wasn't, that guy. But what I can tell you is that Nike's one of the mantras is listen to the voice of the athlete, right? Because we have, even as a great designer, developer, marketing person, you still need insight, and real insight. And Mia was great at that, at giving product feedback, right? So there was so many meetings with her about what do you like, what do you not like, not just color, but feel, style, cleat positioning, materials, all that stuff. And Mia, as our lead product, as our lead female athlete back then, played a huge role in that, right? So, and the soccer business was really small, and you guys been in the business for a while. You knew where Nike came from. From nowhere to getting to close to $3 billion a year in soccer, over the last few years. And I think Mia played a huge role, and so do I think all of our other athletes spend a ton of time, and Nike gets insights from them and incorporates them into the product and communication to consumers, and that works. So.
Yeah. I think this next phase, this is really, we're going to dig into the business, which I think a lot of people really, really want to hear. We could start with your alma mater, NC State, signing a 6-year Adidas deal worth $6.45 million in retail money, up from $3 million. Share with us, when Nike is making these type of decisions, for instance, they already got Duke, they already have North Carolina. Do they, nothing against NC State, but do they really need NC State in this case? Obviously they're trying to get the best for their buck. Give us a little insight, because we're want to hear, you were signing countries, not schools, major clubs. So, that's what I want to expand on this, just because of, your experience in some of these behind the scene deals.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back just really quick though on so just let's take U.S. Soccer Federation for example, right? They were Adidas forever, right? We grew up, watching them and wearing Adidas our whole lives, basically, period. That's the way it was, right? And Adidas did so much to support the sport that we wanted to give back to them, right? Adidas and Budweiser. I remember I was like, I'm drinking Bud and wearing Adidas because they support soccer. They're the only ones back in the day. So I honor that a lot. But when I went to Nike, and speaking about relationships and North Carolina, we played against Appalachian State, right? And our good friend Hank Steinbrecher was the coach of Appalachian State back in the day. And I remember they beat us, I think my junior year, 2-1, Thompson Usean who was a great player, scored, and they had a bunch of non-American kids too. And I went to Hank after the game, and I'm like, how do you get all these kids to come out there? He's like, you need to come visit me someday. So I took that upon myself, and like that spring we took a van to play in an indoor tournament out at in Boone or wherever the hell it is out there. You guys know.
Sawana.
Yeah. And Hank remembered I talked to him, and that night we like partied together, me and Hank, and we just talked about soccer and talked about life, and went back to when he played in New York at the Met Oval, and we grew up in kind of the same area, and talked about the NAIA days and all that stuff. So we had great conversation. We built this really amazing trust and relationship together just through those couple of meetings, and then he eventually left App State. I don't know his whole career after that. I went somewhere, but then he went to Gatorade, as you know, right? Quaker Oats. And then he took over the U.S. Soccer Federation. He was the Secretary General at U.S. Soccer in Chicago. So when I moved in 1988 from North Carolina to Chicago, the first call I made was, "Hey, Hank, I got a job at Nike, and I'm living in Chicago in Glendale Heights." He was in Glen Ellen, believe it or not, the city.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wrote me a letter like saying, "Dear Joe, I'm so proud of you. It's so great to know you." And I was like crying I'm crying now, but I was crying back then in the letter he wrote to me, right? But he said, "Anything you need, I will help you with," right? And so in '93, I was getting some little bit of power at Nike, and I talked to Tom Clark, the president of Nike, and I said, Tom, we can talk to the Secretary General of the U.S. Soccer Federation, and they didn't really know. They just started getting into it, Nike, right at that point, and he said, okay. So he flew to Chicago. We had like a secret meeting in the Admirals Club in American, me, Hank, and Tom Clark, based on a few little things that me and Hank did. My point is, Greg, and I'm going to get to your question, but more direct, but it's still about relationships, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so many stories about behind the scenes, and how do you get in front of someone, and how do you even get their ear, and how do you get them to respect and listen to you, and how do you make it not only about money, right? All of this shit comes down to like relationships, and I'm harping on a little bit too much, but anyway, so Nike wound up with the U.S. Soccer Federation in 1995 based on Hank and Tom Clark and me coming together. And Adidas, I don't know, they weren't paying enough money for what they were getting. And Hank was an American, Nike's an American company. And we built this thing together. And, we jumped in there. We also made a commitment to MLS at the same time, which was great because Rothenberg, and you saw that picture I sent you guys of.
Yes, right.
Of Hank and Alan together having some tequila in the back room. That was at the 96 Olympics in a sorority house in Athens. That was the night after the U.S. women won the Olympics down there. They won the gold medal, and that was Hank and Alan there. So another thing, me, Hank, Alan had this thing where I can get Alan to any meeting too, right? So anyway, that's how the U.S. soccer deal got done, based on that. Obviously, you have to pay too, and you have to have a good product and all sorts of stuff. But
right.
But there's a lot of behind the scenes stories. So to answer you, Greg, you asked me what's it like. I think it's such a broad question because it's like when the strategy changes almost every 4 years. It depends who you have and how much money you have and how much business you're doing and what sport you're getting into, and the world changes and everything. So it's really hard to say how do you do it or what's it like. It just kind of depends. And Nike's really good about strategy. I mean, we get at Nike, we get behind the berm, we fight, but then we all agree on a strategy, and we go out and do it collectively, which is kind of cool, so it's like really dysfunctional behind the scenes, but really functional once we get out to the consumer. So tons of stories about why we do some and why we don't. I mean, specifically the NC State thing. I tried to get NC State to do a deal, but George was an Adidas guy, right? Tarantini, right? Who's
Right.
At NC State, soccer coach during those days, right? And he's from Argentina. Argentina's Adidas. George's brother started the Argentina national team. Yeah. You can't change his mind, right? You can't. He was like, no way he was going to switch because he knew me, So there's personalities involved and feelings involved. And then if you look at the ACC, Nike has everybody. They don't want to get another one, right? I mean, they have Clemson and Duke and Virginia Tech and Virginia. and go on, right? They have most of them, right? So that's why they didn't chase NC State. You can't have everybody. You don't have enough
Right.
money. It doesn't make sense. Everybody. You have to have the best way to explain this is Germany, right? Adidas is from Germany. They're in Germany. They are Germany, right? So we'll never get Nike. Will never. I keep saying we. I hope we'll talk about that. I'm not with Nike anymore at some point here, but
Right,
yeah.
right.
but Nike always wanted to get Germany, but you can't get Germany. You're not going to, and you need a natural enemy anyway. You need because you're not going to have everything. So money's involved, yes. Return on investment is
Talk a little bit about that. What is return on investment in that world? Because I'm sure you got some maybe deals that you could share with us that you didn't think you were going to get, that just sort of landed in your hands because the right timing right there. And then maybe some stories of, you thought you had somebody and they flipped because of something. So obviously you got a lot of experience. Love to hear some of these entertaining stories.
Yeah, return on investment is what everybody wants to talk about, but it's unmeasurable, like literally, right? You can, so you have Chelsea, so you sell X amount of jerseys, so you paid this and you bought. That does, what's the umbrella effect? Like Brazil, for instance, right? Nike signed Brazil, which is like, we didn't have that much business in Brazil. Right? We don't manufacture there. Everything's knockoffs. Blah blah blah. But it's a global effect of what Brazil has. If you're not, everyone's a fan of Brazil. You're a fan of your country first, and then Brazil second, right? Yeah. So what a great signing that was. Just starting in soccer, getting Brazil was huge. And by the way, another little fact that throughout here, 1994 World Cup final, Brazil Italy, there was zero Adi footwear on the pitch. That day. So not back in 94, right? Because we had 7 or 8 Brazilians, and the Italians had Diodoro and Mizuno and Kappa. And that way, and we remember Paolo Maldini against Romario. We have this beautiful picture of them tackling each other, both with Nike shoes. And Nike had nothing back then. We had no teams, no anything. But we started to get the feel for that. So Brazil was a great story, right? Getting that done. It very complicated. Tons of third persons in the middle of it all, right? On these things, right? Who has the rights? That's the other thing in this business. Who has the rights? Who's, that's hard to figure that out, because in Brazil they share with different companies and private equity partners. So it gets kind of messy, right? So Brazil return on investment, you can't measure that. We sell a shitload of Brazil jerseys, but what that does for Nike to talk about attacking young, skilled, exciting, fun, and you throw in an airplane commercial and all this other stuff, right? And it defines your brand, right? And that in itself will, trust me, gets return on investment, right? So some of the ones, like examples of, and I mean, you guys, this is like the first podcast I did, and I'm not going to talk about money, right? But first podcast I'm doing, because I've talked my whole life, right? But now it's going to be recorded. This is kind of. but something like
Joe, we've got 12 listeners. Don't worry.
Well, after me, you're gonna get more. But you talk about the Italian. Let's talk about the Italian national team, right? Nike had them forever, and then we dropped them. And that was a little bit because the league in Italy is so much stronger, or is strong. So the national team is only strong during World Cup, or only during World Cup, right? And then it kind of goes away. Qualifying, but when everybody starts buying stuff, it's once every 4 years. But if you have Juve and Milan and Napoli, you're selling every year, right? Yeah. So I think eventually having Italy was like, okay, let's back down on that a little bit, because let's do some club teams instead, right? So that was an interesting strategy discussion, right? And then we can go deep on the England one too, right? Because Umbro owned the USL. Remember those days?
Right. Oh yeah.
Actually owned the USL. Nike bought Umbro, right? So and then after a few years, we said, we're competing against ourselves. Why do we have two brands like this, right? So we sold Umbro, but we kept the England contract, and we kept the USL league as well. So you bought a brand, and then kept the assets and sold the brand off, stuff like
Right.
that. So there's a bunch of ways. And the best way I can tell you that, so Heather O'Reilly, right? North Carolina, you guys know
Yeah.
Heather, right? So she came, great New Jersey girl, came to me, love her to death, good friends. We talked and talked and talked. I offered her a great deal. She's like, Joe, I love you, but I'm going to go to your competitor. I'm like, why? She said, because you have everybody. So I'm like, what do you mean? She wanted to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond versus coming to Nike where we had, 7 or 8 of the national team players already. So you lose some because they think a little differently,
Right.
they want to do stuff different. So those are all little ideas of ROI, strategy thinking, and some of the stuff that we lost. The biggest one we lost, Greg, and I'm rattling on, sorry, but
No, rattle, please.
was Mexico. Was Mexico, right? I mean, Nike had Mexico, and to me, the Mexican national team is gigantic, right? I mean, never mind in Mexico, but also United States, right? So, and for Nike to let them slip back to Adidas, it was a big problem for Nike ROI business and everything down there. So, and we have Club American, a couple teams down there, but that was, I think that was. If someone writes a book, and there's probably books out about it, one of the big misses in Nike sports marketing in football or soccer, losing Mexico was huge. So, Greg, how's the Mexican sales in stores?
I think you're spot on. It does sell well. It does sell well in the U.S. There is a definite, crowd for it. I was going to ask you what, you mentioned the Mexico deal. Tell us why, and I'm talking more of the average countries, not, the England, the France, those types, but we see Nike on some of these countries and we're like, why did they pick that one? Right.
Like Sweden.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. Like Sweden. I mean, Sweden's a good team, and they're probably in every World Cup, men's and women's. In the women's, they're probably final 8. In the men's, they're final 4. In the men's, they're final 16, final 8, maybe on a good year, a good cycle, whatever, So, but Sweden has less people than New Jersey. So how do you, you know what I'm saying? So
no, that's a good question. And once again, the money is a lot different from England and Sweden, as you know too, right?
Obviously. Yeah. Right.
But so here's, and I'm going to go. I'm going to try to explain it by going back to Germany again, where Nike did a running event, and this is in Germany, and we did put money at retail, and we did TV commercials, and we, did the Berlin Marathon, and we, did a couple of race car drivers, and we did all this stuff in Germany. You spend so much money in Germany, right? And you only get like 8% market share in all of Germany for your footwear. After all this stuff we're doing, like hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever, spending, right? And it doesn't drive the business. But if you sign a German national team and get rid of all that other stuff, you will quadruple your business.
Yeah.
Right. So the asset is important. And I'm assuming, I don't have all the knowledge about Sweden, but it's the country is so, I love my country. Holland's a perfect example of that, right? I mean,
yes, right.
Person in that country stops and buys an orange jersey, right?
Yeah.
I think Sweden's probably a little bit the same, where the people in Northern Europe said, what assets do we want? Goes through all the countries, go through all the sports. You make a little pyramid. Which one? How much money do we have? How much is our whole business? Should we do that? Or not? And that's probably how they settled on Sweden, right? To be honest with you, it's becoming more scrutinized what you do, though, because it's not about the money you pay; it's about the service. Because I mean, I can go to Canada. You guys probably know that story about the Canada Federation, where we didn't give them a New Jersey, Nike didn't give them a New Jersey for last World Cup, and that they were upset because we had so many teams and so many countries, and service is difficult.
Yes.
And at some point you have to understand your resources to service as well. So,
well, that's a good segue, which I definitely want you to comment on. Instead of Canada, before that was Nigeria, right? That jersey took off.
Yeah.
No one, I mean, Joe, I mean, it was in magazines, non-soccer magazines, because people were wearing it for a fashion shirt. It was global. It was so hard to get. Share what you remember about that experience with
Yeah,
that.
no,
I mean, did you think it was going to take off like
the,
that?
that hit that well. It was a cool design and really awesome. And Nigeria plays fun football, but that was when I was talking earlier about timing. That society change where sports and culture, came together just at that time, right? And fashionistas and the internet and all the TikTokers and everything else, were influencers, right? Were driving consumer stuff, and they loved it and they wore it, and that helped drive it.
Yeah.
Not just Nigeria won the World Cup, but I don't even think they qualified last World Cup, right, or something.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that just the fashion part of that caught on, and a lot of companies get that now, where they want to connect sport with fashion to consumers, and it's a big deal. But that was fun. So
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the USL a little bit, and obviously that organization has exploded, and Nike still will do some deals with these franchises, which is great. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, again, we go back to the ROI, and sure, they're going to say they got the pro team, they got the academy, they got all the youth, right? And so when you put all that and shake it up, is it still a good deal in your opinion?
yeah, I mean, once again, like the whole pay for play / club / ECNL versus that academy. I mean, just the fragmentation of soccer and the evolution of the fragmentation of our sport is like, you need to be a PhD to keep up with all the stuff that's going on and where your kids play or whatever now, right? And then
Right.
what's of value, what's not of value, right? And that's where I kind of went back to, like, if it's good people, we like to do deals with them, because they'll overwork for you, over deliver for you, right? That's kind of what you need to figure out, right? But I'm a big fan of USL. I think they're doing things really well. I love that there's an alternative in the smaller cities. People have their home team and stuff like that. They're getting into women's league now too. So I'm not one of those guys who, I'm not anti MLS. I'm not pro MLS. I'm up for our sport growing and everybody having an opportunity and pitching in and fighting like that. I have so much respect for people giving their life to the sport and giving their money to the sport to help it grow. So I'm a pro everything, right? Kind of, but I like the USL. I like what they're doing. And to specifically answer the ROI part of that, I mean, look, you want to sell jerseys, right? You want to sell shorts, you want to sell balls, but you still want to sell your brand, right? So I don't think that you guys know, you don't make a big margin on soccer jerseys, and you have to bring in so many and stock them, and you only sell half the stock, and Nike was really organized on operations and logistics and money, right? So the team uniform business is tough to make any money on, but I would rather sign a club, USL team that has a youth club,
Sure.
than one that doesn't. So
Right.
so we would look at it like that. Like, I don't even know, Des Moines Menace, right? They at one point their USL only had 10,000 kids. That's like a perfect one. Even what are you doing in Des Moines? Why are you doing Des Moines? They haven't won anything, You should be doing, Miami. Well, they don't have a youth. So there's so many factors in deciding like who you partner with. That as well. So
Yeah, you mentioned growing the sport. You were certainly, an advocate of that. I think people forget that you were a big part of the Norwegian signing of Ada Herdberg, $1 million deal, 10-year deal, and she sat out the last World Cup, right? So maybe share some insight to that and why you believe this was a good investment.
Nike supports athletes, right? That support the world, that support community, that support doing things right. There's been some mistakes, right, to getting the wrong athlete that can see things go sideways, as has been documented a lot of places too. But I mean, she's someone who stood up for her rights and what she wanted to do, right? I mean, and I always go back to this is probably one to get me in trouble, but the Tanya Harding thing. Remember, like Tanya Harding when like someone hit Nancy Kerrigan with a pipe and it was all connected. And Tanya Harding was a Nike athlete, right? Back then, she's from Portland, and everybody, and Nike didn't drop her at all until it was 1,000,000% proven guilty, right? But support. So I think Ada was the same way. She has feelings, she has beliefs, and Nike was supporting her all the way, whether she plays or not. That's not why we signed her. We signed her as a person for our brand, as part of the team, the family, right? Not, and look, she probably missed bonuses because she didn't play and win. There's other parts of deals, like you still have your deal, but then there's like performance bonuses. She probably missed out by not playing on some stuff, but that's not the point. The point is we kept our relationship, and then she probably talks great, or she does. She talks good about Nike everywhere she goes, to every kid, every time she's on TV, every time she's talking to somebody. And that's what you want, right? I mean, in life, we all want people to talk good about us, and, I've learned that somehow, some way early too. And, I really said no to 99% of the people in my life that I've talked to. Being in sports marketing, you can't do everything. And everybody, I got a team, I got a player, I got an event, I got this, that. And it's just, And I used to go to the convention, and as soon as someone said, Joe, I've got, I'm like, oh no, what do they have? I've got, this was the first words, I've got. I'm like, I'm cringe, but you have to, you have to say no to 99%, but you have to say no, thank you. I love what you're doing. Appreciate what you're committing your life to this and that. At this time, it just doesn't fit into our strategic plan. But I wish you all the best, and I'll buy a fucking glass of wine. Okay, that's the deal, and that's what I live by. Which is why I think I can maintain my friendship with you guys. Eric, you put me out of business at my soccer kickstart when you started in North Carolina back then. So I mean, look at us now. You
moved to Chicago to work for Nike.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way.
yeah, exactly.
I want to talk a little bit about, the World Cup, as you alluded to. The fee in '98 was $100 million is what Adidas paid. But you look at some of, quote unquote, your guerrilla marketing that we all hear about. Billboards on the fringes of forbidden marketing zones, SWAT teams in Nike clothing handing out just do it cards outside the stadium. Totally outraged the Olympic officials in Atlanta in 1996. Share what goes on in creating some of this chaos.
Yeah, well, once again, an evolution question over time, because now Nike is part of the system. I mean, we have deals with federations and leagues, and but traditionally, 30 years ago, you didn't have those deals, right? So you became, you weren't in the in crowd. So what are you going to do, right? You couldn't go have a meeting with FIFA. You couldn't. And Adidas blocked everything right back then because they were good, they were smart, and they paid their way, right? So you had to find ways to do disruptive things and be noticed, and that's kind of what we did. You'd sit around like do disruptive things. The best one was '94 World Cup, where we had our whole marketing strategy was Brazilian painter caps. We had like 250,000 Brazilian painters caps, those little 40 cents things that were yellow, right? And I went to the '94 World Cup. I was like, I had like all the tickets, the World Cup tickets. I like laid into bed with them and rolled around them. And and I would like stack them by stadium and by team, by group, and they're like, I was like so at that point, right? But and I went to I don't know 10 of the venues probably, but I remember having these big tubes of painters caps, and I would go around outside the stadium to give them out to everybody. And look, Brazil won the World Cup. People were wearing those hats like at the Sweden, Portugal game. Like they were everywhere, and it turned out to be a pretty cool thing. So that's an example of the guerrilla stuff. I remember a tennis story too about we didn't really have the tennis deal in New York, but what we did, they went to all the taxis, like the yellow cab, and we did a deal with them. We put a tennis ball with a swoosh on it on all their antennas.
Cool.
the car antennas. So that was one of the
Cool.
things that went around. And then you won't remember this. So I'm going to tell you the story about at the NSCAA show one year. We didn't really have any products. You know, it was early on. It wasn't that good. It wasn't ready or whatever. So all we did was we brought a Hummer into the NCAA floor. That was it. We bought turf in and parked the Hummer on. Had like 2 shoes in the windows. That was it. And then we were standing around talking to everybody. We didn't really have anything. So I mean, look, there's creative people. I'm not creative, but there's some great ideas and great creative people to do all that guerrilla stuff. But eventually, you guys, you know, you can't just live by that alone. So when you start doing, best example I can remember is 2019 Women's World Cup in Canada, where we had a, you know, FIFA's smarter and everybody gets smarter about blocking their rights and keeping their rights and everything, right? But we had like an underground bar, restaurant, you know, hangout room that we turned into a whole Nike nightclub and product place. And we had like 3v3 down there. We built a little stadium, like all under this parking garage, right? It was freaking really cool. And it was like kind of inside the lines, but not really, like right on the border of where they draw that, you know, line thing, you know. And everybody would come there and stop by. And, you know, you had to do that. But in the meantime, I was also trying to sign Canada, right? So I'm like, don't put it too close, you know, and don't, you know, blah, blah, blah. And, so we, you know, you move around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to block a bunch of other companies from getting in there. Yeah. So you learn by. So.
You know, someone asked me, because I told them you were going to be on, and they had a question for me, which, you know, I took as sort of normal. But when they said it, I went, you know what? I bet a lot of people would like to know. So what was it like working for Phil Knight? What was the interaction of him and the soccer marketing departments at that time?
I mean, I probably had maybe 10 or 12 interactions with him. He was way above everything, right? And he ran the show. I shouldn't say he was close. He knew what was going on all the time. He admittedly didn't know about soccer, you know, but I remember him coming to us really early on, me and a couple of the sales rep guys said, don't worry, we're going to be on top of the world on this one day, you know? So that was really cool, right? He loved Mia. I mean, he was really supportive. Mia would always go and have a meeting with him on her own, you know, when she came to campus. So they had some, you know, a little relationship there. You know, when I started with Nike, they were pretty much North America only based, right? I mean, running, you know, so the whole global growth of Nike could not happen without soccer, right? It would without football. Yeah. Because I remember we did a survey like Korea, Argentina, Poland, you know, Costa Rica, where we did a big survey around the world, and everyone came back and said, we're not even an authentic sports company if we're not in football, right? So yeah, so you couldn't even sell like running and basketball and tennis and all this stuff in Germany if you weren't even a legitimate sports company in football. So Nike had to become really important in football to grow their global business in running, tennis, walking, and all this stuff. So Phil, once he realized, you know, that that was important, he got further connected, you know, to it. But you know, he doesn't go to a lot of games. Never really a huge fan. You know, big track and field, big tennis, big basketball fan, right? And he was really honest about that, you know. And then he hired some good people in soccer. Is what he did. So, you know, I mean, Mia, you know, I can't remember. He didn't come to really any World Cup finals that I know of. So yeah, I mean, not much. Really. I mean, when we had people on campus, like Brandy came on campus one time, he would always be there, you know, at Nike campus. Right? We brought someone to corporate. He always came, said hello, always wanted them to come up, visit, you know. That was a big deal. And the athletes always wanted to go see him too. Yeah. It was like a perfect, you know, like a perfect win-win win-win world there. So he knew and he was connected, but it wasn't his passion. And with all the shit going on in sports all around the world, where do you go? When do you go?
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned they hired, you know, some other people, and at that time, Evie, you know, this was sort of like breaking news in the industry when Tom Kane from Adidas got hired and went to Nike. I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? you know,
From New
what's
Jersey,
going
another New
on.
Jersey guy, by the way.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, and played
Yeah.
at Duke University when I was coaching there. I love Tom Kane. Tom Kane is that guy who would do. Greg, I'm telling you, I'm going sideways here.
I love Tommy too,
Yeah,
and he's been a friend of mine for forever, really. And even when he was at Adidas, he tried to hire me a bunch of times when I was at Nike. Right? so we got pretty close during that, and then I remember meeting with some bosses at Nike, and they're like saying, "We need to do more in soccer. We need help. We need help." I'm like, don't even think. Just go get Tommy.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody was watching what Adidas is doing, how they were growing, how they're building. They set up that, the division, soccer division, and he was the head of that. And he's focused and driven and smart and passionate, and he's a perfect guy, and he's a business guy, right? So I told, it was Sandy Bodek and Roger Wyatt, two guys. You remember Roger from the old Admiral days or anything too, right? They were VPs at Nike. And they were trying to strategically plan to get another soccer guy in there. And I'm like, don't even post a job. Don't even put an ad out. Don't even worry about, just go get Tommy. Right. And they did that. So, they went down to dinner with him, meeting with him, and Tommy took the offer. I think he had to sit out for a year.
Yeah.
Non-compete and everything. But then he came over and he rose really fast inside of Nike as well. He actually ran sports marketing in Europe.
Right.
An American running sports marketing in Europe, and when soccer is 90% of the business, he's an American guy, and he succeeded pretty well over there. Came back over here and then ran North America sports marketing, which he had probably the biggest budget of anyone in the world that Nike has under North America sports marketing. So Tommy was a good guy, good friend. Still lives in Oregon. I talked to him a couple months. So.
You've done a lot of charity work with Nike, a lot of donations, dedications. Which experiences do you really remember that caught you by surprise, as opposed to, hey, I got to do this again and then again? Which ones that sort of stick out to you?
A lot of them were done in partnership, right? We were partners with the foundation back in the beginning before they split a little bit from the federation, and now they do more MLS and Adidas stuff. So some foundation stuff was good. We did some things in California. A lot of it's around building mini pitches and places for kids to play. So look, philanthropic and community right now are the two most important things in the world almost, right? If you're talking to somebody or want to sign somebody or want to hire somebody or look at yourself in the mirror, it's about, what are you giving back for kids, right? And, my dad, who drove a bus in New Jersey for 40 years, was robbed at gunpoint, went back to work the next day, stuff shit like that happened, right? I always remember saying, all I want to do is provide a better life for you, for his kids, So I feel that way. And I remember that all the time from him now, where I think it's my responsibility and all of our responsibilities to, not give our money away, but to always think about how we can help other kids, right? So I think making places to play are important. I helped Kearney get a couple fields through the foundation with Jerry McEwen, who's my best friend nowadays. He's the PDA. He's coaching director of PDA in New Jersey, right? So I helped him do that. We did some fields in California. I don't know, Greg. I don't know if you're getting at something specific I'm forgetting, but I think in general nowadays, if you do a deal with a player or anything, you should say, here is 90% of the money and 10% of it you have to do something with. Right. I think that's really the best way to do it now, right? I work with Christian Pulisic right now, right? One of my new jobs. And I was just in Miami last week, he has Christian's whole legacy is going to be about giving back. He sees the pay per play thing. He wants kids that don't have a chance to have more of a chance. Right. And I commend that. And he's, 23, 24, thinking that way already. We're, thinking that way older, but I love that. And I'm glad you asked me that question. I don't remember any specific one that overpowered me though. So.
Well, this is a good segue, so as I mentioned, you were formerly with Nike. So share with everyone, what are you doing now? how, sort of your little promo. I know, you may not want to brag, but, be humble in your way, how people would, maybe look at a website or something like that. And what's your maybe 3 to 5 year vision here to sort of, I don't want to say reinvent you, because, that's not really the word I'm looking for, but maybe just, get you re-energized as you move on to the next journey in your life here.
Yeah. So, I can't say I was a little disappointed. I mean, Nike made major changes the way they're structured and organized and what they look like versus the world, right? And I got caught up like in an algorithm of these X amount of people making this looking like that, or we're gonna make some space for other people, right? Which I got and I understand it, and I was trying to do that anyway all along. But so I think it was like 4 years too early. I wanted to get to 26 World Cup. Would have been like would have been so cool, right? For me, after my whole life of what I've done, that would be the pinnacle of whatever. So that didn't happen. So maybe a little more than a year ago, I moved on. I got a severance package and shook hands with everybody that I needed to at Nike, right? And I for a couple months I just like, okay, what am I going to do? And I sat out here on this deck, having a bunch of wine, and thinking about what I want to do, and kind of shut my phone off for a little bit, right, for a couple months, and then I put it back on, and like people were calling me literally like every day, like saying, Joe, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know where I want to live, don't know what I want to do, well, why don't you help me? And this was like players, teams, leagues, clubs, agents, all. And I'm like, holy shit, this is cool. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I started LLC. So I have Elsmore Consulting LLC. I'm working with San Diego Surf Cup. I'm working with Christian Pulisic. I've got about 5 or 6 other things that are going really well. So I'm making a good living. I'm in soccer. I don't have to set the alarm anymore to get up. I don't have any bosses. I have no boss, and I have nobody reporting to me, because at Nike, really, or in any big company, the HR piece there's so much work you did internally, you couldn't really use your skills to be back outside. So it got cumbersome. So now I'm freed of all that now. And I used to come to the NSCA convention everywhere, and I used to hide in the room or go, at the bar. I did the Ken Chartier, who I learned a lot from him, loving he would always sit at the end of the bar in the dark corner, having all his meetings. And that's what I did for a long time. But now I'm like back out there. Like I would never have done this, like 10 years ago, or when, because everybody would have like figured out who I was and tried to connect me and get money or get the deal, right? So, but now I'm back out there again, reconnecting to all the people like I used to when I first started. So I'm really energized just in general by being back out there, reconnecting and stuff like that. And I have some pretty cool jobs. And I also started a company called Gold Badge Sports with 2 friends of mine, Rafael Ortega and Chris Bond, to try to build on, merchandising, marketing, sales, sports marketing of soccer companies. And you guys know now there's so many, every day there's a new company coming to, selling soccer, being in soccer, getting in soccer, especially with 26. And I'm like on the edge of, I talk to everybody. So they're all calling me, seeing if I can help, trying to work out deals in that way. I've made some mistakes. Sometimes it's too much. I want to get focused in on like 2 or 3 things to get through 26, but now 27, right? Women's World Cup might be here. Yeah. And I learned a lot, by the way, in planning. Never plan to after World Cup 26. You always have to go further. We made a mistake a lot in business. We'd plan to the event. Event was over. We're like, no, what are we going to do? You need to plan longer on all the stuff you do. So I don't know. That's what I'm doing. I'm in the soccer business. If you guys need anyone's help, then call me. Love to chat to them and try to figure something out. So thanks for that. Thanks for putting me on here. I'm sure more people will get connected to me that way.
At least 12.
Yeah. So, 13 was my number. Remember, number 13.
Okay. So Mo, you'll kick it up to 17.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good return on investment, Bone.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. 4 people, and right. It's about $1 an hour, by the way, you guys. So
let me ask this. How hard were you? I don't want to say scared, but the unknown. Even I don't care what age you are and how confident you are, especially with there's so many things going. You're balancing, trying to figure out what you want to do, and soccer's exploding, and you want to be part of it. was it hard to say yes and no to a lot of these opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it's I had to retrain my brain and my life, because going to work in corporate for 32 years, we have a giant company covering you for everything, and an Amex card to fly anywhere I want. I mean, the last 14 World Cups, men's and women's, and Olympics. So I basically I've had no stress in terms of finance or getting your next meal or stuff like that. And not that it's that, but the I mean, I was a little bit worried. I mean, look, I can probably retire to like a small little house in the middle of Florida or somewhere, but I don't want to do that. I want to be in a Jersey Shore. I want to be, in California or Scottsdale or like somewhere really cool where I can hang out and me and my wife can walk to coffee and have a nice house, have a pool, whatever. So you want all these things, right? And then also depends if you have kids, right? I have a daughter, 28 in California and a 25-year-old son still here. So like, when are they going to be set in their ways, and and how much do you have to help them? So a lot of your family life comes into how stressed are you about working or not working, right? So I was stressed, and I still am a little bit, because you want to make money and you want to have a good living, you want to be part of the sport. So Greg, almost more about the last point, like, can I cut off? This is what I don't know, right? And you guys, Hank's still talking soccer. Everybody is still involved as a consultant or doing something. So how can you, as what I've done my whole life, how do I fade away to doing nothing, which would be really hard? How do I fade away to doing just enough to keep me happy and make money is tricky, right? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I don't have the answers yet. I've accepted a bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have, and I've, and I'm doing some things where I think I should get paid more, so I guess I don't know. I couldn't answer that question. I answered all the other questions tonight. That one I couldn't answer.
No.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to, right? I mean, again, the unknown of, what the market value of what you're doing is, right? I mean, you just said, you maybe whatever group you're working with, you surcharge more, but you didn't. But then the other stuff you took on and it's not panning out the way you want, right? That's just, we live and we learn, right? So Mr. Producer Ryan, did you have any questions that maybe I didn't cover?
He's probably asleep. He's probably asleep.
He probably is asleep.
I got a good nap in earlier today. No, I didn't. I'm not asleep.
But before we
I only cursed one time. I only cursed one curse.
I'm not editing it out anyway.
No,
we
leave
it in.
Yeah, we're in over
That's
17.
A miracle.
I
only had one curse in there. So.
Yeah, we're an over 17 show, so that's okay.
And we leave it in because it's more organic that way anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like the conversations, we always try to make sure that our conversations stay as natural as possible, right? So we don't go in and edit that stuff out. I don't know that I have a whole lot of questions. Usually I get a list together, but Greg, you covered a lot of the stuff we had already talked about.
Okay.
Because I think the Mia Hamm thing is super interesting. We're actually going to share both of those videos as we promote your episode from the dentist office and the Michael Jordan commercial. I'm going to use those. I have links to both of those. They were actually on my radar ahead of time, and I was like, oh, I really want to ask a question about this Michael Jordan one.
Oh,
yeah. So
I did my homework. Okay.
Yeah, it was fun that you put that in there because my love for the Bulls and the back in the day, they were my team for sure. I guess the interesting, or the one question that I would have as far as like with the USL, like USL only has one club in Nike right now, and Puma's kind of got their grips on everything in the USL, and it almost looks like USL is kind of pushing clubs to go that route. When in your time with Nike, how difficult was it to really go after some of those clubs? I know like FC Cincinnati was in Nike before they moved to MLS, but when clubs were approaching you or approaching Nike, was there a struggle with the smaller clubs that were coming in that you just didn't know or weren't sure because they didn't have that youth component, or how did that really pan out there?
I mean, USL and Nike is another whole podcast on itself, right? So you guys, I told the soccer kick story, and we bought that franchise from Nick Papadakis, right?
Mhm.
You know, the CEO of USL is now Alec Papadakis, right?
Right.
Me and Alec are good friends. Nike owned the USL, right, for a few years. We sold it to Nick and to, can't remember the name of the company, the holding company that owns them. I sold it to Alec in the company, holding company, right? And we kept a 10-year marketing agreement with them. This was probably like 20 years ago, maybe now, right? So we didn't own it anymore, but we had a 10-year deal with them, marketing deal, right? And we had first rights to go to teams and do deals, and we had a ton of teams: Birmingham, San Antonio, Sacramento.
I think Birmingham's the only one that I found that was still in it.
Yeah,
That
I
was-
mean that's another Duke connection right down there, right? With who's the guy down there? Eric, the Duke guy at Birmingham.
Jay Heap.
Jay Heaps, yeah, Jay Heaps.
Oh
right?
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I had a relationship with all the last just the past generation of USL. So the new USL, right? Oh, by the way, Nike, we did not do a good job marketing USL back in the day, because we had the federation, right? And we had the women's national team, the men's national team, and all this other stuff going on, and all these youth clubs. And there's just some reason I couldn't get the Nike marketing department to give resources to USL to build them up, right? Because it wasn't what it is now, right? So they've done a great job, right? And I love those guys on there, and I think they're doing incredible. And I wish Nike had more teams. But by the way, I'm working for Puma now with Christian too, so I have, I know what they're doing, and I like what they're doing, right? But they don't have the national team or MLS, Puma, right? So, and the biggest reason why it's hard to do a deal with USL is because the owners have put a ton of money into it, and they really care about it, and they really care about their branding and their look and their feel and their design, and they all want to design their own uniforms with a color and a look and a building from New Mexico in the background, and Nike can't do that. I mean, that's not how they're set up to do 14 small teams, custom made uniforms, and then sell them at retail, right? And the bottleneck's really in the design department, Greg. I mean, that's like, how do you? They can't do that. It's too much, right? So that's what's happened now. It's getting a little better. The bottleneck's breaking up, but I'm not sure that, outside of the. I don't want to say the value is not there. I just want to say it's hard to do all work based on what you're doing, and you have to make a decision. And I think you're doing a great job. And I love USL. I think doing a great job in their communities. I think it's hard for a big company to do that, right?
Yeah, real quick, you hit on something, designing custom uniforms and delivering them, right? And you mentioned, the struggles that Nike is having. But it's crazy. That's where some other companies are really cutting their edge. A New Balance, an Under Armour with an Allison, maybe. Adidas now, I think, is sort of getting their act together after some challenges. But you're right. That's what they want. I mean, you're working with Puma. I mean, holy cow! That you talk about at the end of the chain, right? They're really struggling to do something, custom wise. And when you do find a company, it's always like, who are they? I've never heard of them, right? I don't know if I want to wear them. So again, that balance. So
that's a constant struggle, right? Like we want the swoosh, or we want the three stripes, and I'm like, but you just told me you want to create your own brand. How do you do that?
What does Jeff Duback now? What's he doing? What's he doing?
Hummel,
right? Yeah. So let's go to Greenville, right? John Harkes, hometown. Great friend. He was Nike for a few years. Hummel came in and said, "What do you want your uniform to look like?" And the owner's like, "Oh shit, I can, bring in, pieces of Greenville's history, and and it's just, and Nike's getting better. Take a look at the NWSL, right? Another deal that I did with the whole league. Mm-hmm. So the first year in NWSL, we did plain black and green and red, plain jerseys. Now they're getting design elements into their uniforms. So Nike having the whole NWSL is a big job, and they have the whole NFL, and they have the whole NBA, and they have Major League Baseball, right? So I mean, you start throwing in national teams, and you start throwing USL in there too. It's a huge amount of work.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for designers.
Yes. Yeah. That's why companies are moving to Portland too, because there's so many designers here.
Yeah.
That's why companies come here. So.
All right, EV. Ryan had a nice question. I don't know if you had any more for.
No, I don't. I don't have any questions. I sort of play off what you were talking about, Greg, and what Joe answered extremely well. Is like what's the next step? What do you do next? And I always go back to, because not this is a goalkeeping thing, but as you know, Greg, the last year in May was my last training session. And I was like, I'm done on the field. I'm just not going to do it anymore. I've done it for 44 years. That's enough. But I always hearken back to something that Hank told me, and that I mentioned when we did the naming of the field was, if you have played the sport and you love the sport, then regardless of what your position is, you constantly try to give back to the sport and be a good custodian of the sport in whatever avenue you're in, right? It may be coaching, it may be marketing, it may be, helping little kids, whatever it is, right? It may, and you try to take care of the game, and as Joe alluded to many times, you try to grow the game, and because the fact of the matter is, everybody who's on this podcast and everybody who's listening to it is involved in the game. The game has been a major part of their life. Yeah, and so, so I think that's what you do. The four of us to our dying breath are gonna be thinking about the game in some capacity, or we're gonna be thinking about somebody who is near and dear to us from the game. And that's what it gives you. And if it gives you that, then it's your responsibility to give back somehow.
Yeah, and Eric, I'll bring this back around to goalkeeping a little bit, right? To close, I'll make my last comment. So I'm involved with a company called Footballer Life, capital F, capital T, capital B, capital L, capital R, Life. Football Life. It's a website starting up, a global website where kids are coming on and sharing videos and sharing everything. It's a social place that we're building. I'm on the advisory board. I have a couple of those, right? But now that I'm talking to everybody, goalkeeper is huge. I mean, there's so much going on in the goalkeeper world with companies that are with materials and performance. And I talked to a guy from Germany the other day, wants me to help him get into the United States. And that wasn't really my thing, but there's stuff I can even send to you because I'm talking to everybody now. And I actually talked, they wanted me to help them get to Nike. And I talked to Nike, and Nike said, we're not, goalkeeper. There's so many people in it now that we're just going to do our 2 or 3 and stick with that because there's so many companies that are involved now. So I'm sure you hear that, but I think opportunity for goalkeeper specific stuff is out there, and you would be amazing in that, not to mention all the other sports. And now you could be in the media too. Now that you're got
well, and you know what? And here's the thing with goalkeepers: they never go away. Yeah. They don't. Even when they just don't. They just hang around.
And they think they run the whole show from back there.
We've been sitting back there watching for decades, and we were the only smart ones because who the fuck wants to run?
Right? I'm gonna trash all the listeners right now. So this is gonna be anti-Joe, anti-goal. I would never go in there. I respect goalkeepers big time. So
but
thank you guys so much,
Joe. Thank you for taking time and speaking with us. And this has been a great episode because it's all soccer guys, and you are what I call a deep soccer guy, and we appreciate your time, and we appreciate you doing this for us. And please keep in touch. We'd love to have you back on. So.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thanks
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening and watching the 3 Old Goalies. Be sure to join us next time. Like, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our great content. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter.
Can't get enough of the Three Old Goalies? Be sure to check us out at www.3oldgoalies.com.